Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again for another First Impression Fridays, and today I have two fragrances from Widian, Black number 3 and New York, so stay tuned for that. If you like First Impressions, fragrance reviews, cologne comparisons, and top 10 lists, hit that subscribe button for more great content. So I am actually a fan of the brand Widian. A lot of it actually has to do with the fact that I really like the aesthetic. The bottles are really cool looking, but they do also have some really good fragrances, and I did some hunting on Fragrantica through the Black collection to find out which one sounded the best to me. And so I got a sample of Black 3, and I've wanted to try New York for quite some time as well, as it sounded really good and got really great reviews from a lot of people. So I'm going to get right into the review, or the first impressions. I'm going to start with Black 3. No particular reason, really. Just because. This one did sound actually a little bit more like one that I'll like more than New York, but it's hard to say. This one's like leathery and stuff like that. So there is a bit of a sweetness there. There's a bit of a lightness. It's actually slightly fresh. I definitely get the mint. So this one does have a mint note in it. And I get a little bit of... Sometimes I find that leather notes come off a little bit sour. And I get a little bit of that sourness right in the opening. Funny, I do get a little bit of something that smells like maybe like raspberry or juniper, not juniper berry, but some kind of a sweet sort of almost candied berry. Definitely picking up that leather more. It is actually, so it's not coming off as a sort of a sour smell anymore, but does come across like a really nice leather. I will say in the initial first little bit, that mint was giving me a little bit of a toothpaste vibe. That seems to be toning down. And this is one thing I do find a lot. I find that mint can easily be something that does come off a little bit like toothpaste, and I really don't like when it has that vibe. Obviously, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would say the same thing. It's got a bit of an earthy smell, something like maybe vetiver. I'm not entirely sure. I will say, especially because I was digging these fragrances up, I did look into the notes what these ones have in them, because I wanted to see if I was interested in them. And yeah, so I do know some of the notes. I don't really remember if this one had vetiver. I think that it did, but it definitely has this sort of earthy, a little bit soily, not dirty per se, but very earthy kind of a vibe to it. Still getting that mint. It's toned down a lot. It's definitely cut down a lot. It's way less minty than it was in the first, minute or so. Very interesting combination of fragrance notes that I personally wouldn't have thought of. There's a bit of sweet, minty, somewhat even fresh feeling, and earthy as well. So very interesting fragrance. I'm gonna move over to New York, and see what that one's all about. I have tried London as well. London is nice. It does remind me of Tom Ford Tuscan leather. This one does sound like something that I've never heard of before, so I was very interested to try this one out. So let's get into New York. I forget who it was. I was watching somebody else's review of this the other day, and they said it was really good, which reminded me that I had wanted to try this fragrance out. Decided to, I picked up a sample a long time ago, and I just kind of had it sitting there. So without further ado, that does actually remind me of something. It's a little bit fresh, spicy. So a little bit of sweetness there too. If I remember, this is actually a very complex fragrance with respect to notes, so there's a lot of notes in this one. There's something that does actually remind me a little bit of like cotton candy or something like that. kind of funny because it reminds me a little bit of like Baccarat Rouge or Absolutio a little bit. So that one, Absolutio especially, has a lot of saffron in it, and it's like a spicy, sweet fragrance, and I am getting a similar kind of vibe. Which again is interesting because they do have one that's like Baccarat Rouge 540, which is Liwa, and it's very, very similar to Baccarat Rouge. This one, there's this sweet woody vibe that really does remind me of something like Absolutio, although I gotta say, this one comes off a little bit sweeter. So Absolutio I find is really a saffron and dry wood fragrance or driftwood fragrance with other aspects to it. This has that woody, spicy feeling to it, but it has a lot more sweetness. Really interesting. I would be interested to see if there's either driftwood or saffron in this fragrance. I actually don't remember any of the notes other than it does have orris in it, which I'm not really picking up at all. But definitely has that sweet cotton candy vibe. Very interesting. I'm going to let that one sit. That is really interesting. I actually do enjoy it. I'm going to go back to Black 3, see if it's sort of developed a little bit, see what's happening with that fragrance, and see what I got to say. It's becoming way, way, way earthier. So honestly, this one does remind me a lot of, in some sense, like Ancre Noir. Not that it smells really like it, but it has this really, really earthy, almost soil-like vibe to it. The mint is really, really toned down. So right in the opening especially, there was quite a bit of mint. It did start to taper off fairly quickly, but even now, within a couple minutes, I feel like a lot of the other notes are starting to make themselves a lot more prominent. I think there's something with the sort of, maybe it's vetiver, but mixing with the leather to give it an interesting vibe for sure. I do still get the mint. It does have a bit of a cooling effect overall, but it's not exceptionally minty. The good thing is that the mint that I'm getting now, which is definitely there, doesn't remind me of toothpaste in any way. There was a little bit, like I mentioned in the opening, where I did feel like it had a little bit of a toothpaste vibe. That's definitely sort of toned down a lot, and it is kind of a cooling, minty effect, which is really nice. It's not overly crisp, but it is a little bit of a cooling effect. And like I said, it does have that sort of earthy, woody kind of vibe to go along with it. Interesting, very interesting. I'm going to go back to New York, which is complete surprise to me so far. But let's see if it's developed a little bit, changed a little bit. So it does still have that kind of cotton candy vibe and even a little bit of that sort of latex feel to it. But there is a bit of a juicy sort of candy-like feel to it. It does still feel a little bit spicy, but not overly. There is definitely a little bit of a spice vibe to it, but it's pretty toned down. It's not like a heavy saffron or anything like that, but it does feel like there's something there a little bit. Sweet, pleasant, enjoyable. Interestingly, I think, you know, both of these fragrances would be similar seasons anyways, fall, winter, more so than anything else. You could maybe wear Black 3 in the spring, especially because it has that sort of soily, kind of vetiver-y feel that I always kind of associate with spring a lot of the time. It does have a little bit of that feel going for it. Although it does have, and it has a little bit of a cooling effect from that mint, but the other one, New York, definitely feels a little bit more like a cool weather fragrance. It's sweet, a little bit spicy, but very, very sweet cotton candy. Has a little bit of that flossy feel to it as well. Very interesting. I wouldn't have expected them to have two fragrances that kind of have a similarity to something like Baccarat Rouge 540, but I mean, Liwa to me is even more like Baccarat Rouge 540. And it's a lot sweeter than this one, but this one definitely has similar vibes going for it. And it does feel to me a little bit classier, to be honest with you. There's something about it that does feel like it could be worn a little bit more formally. There's something that does feel like that with this fragrance more so than Black 3. Black 3 doesn't come across especially casual, but it doesn't feel quite as much like a dress-up fragrance. It's a little bit more of one that, I mean, it's not going to really, I feel like, capture people the same way that New York is. New York has something about it that, to me, captures the attention. Maybe it's the sweetness, that kind of cotton candy feel, but there is something about it that definitely, I think, is a little bit more captivating about it. Makes it something more suitable for those formal occasions where you might want to be a little more captivating. Something that works a little bit more for a date, especially too, because it has that sweetness. But ultimately, both are, I think, better cold weather fragrances. Both are nice. I am actually a little bit surprised. Going into this, I really thought I was going to like Black 3 more. I do like New York a lot more. New York is... It does have this sort of buried cotton candy, a little bit like Baccarat Rouge 540 kind of a feel to it. That cotton candy feel. Really interesting, really nice. But it doesn't have the latex vibe that I get a lot with Baccarat Rouge. So this is really nice in that respect. Black 3 is interesting, especially if you like those earthy, soily fragrances. I think this is one that you should definitely check out. But again, not really what I was expecting, but nonetheless, very nice. But for me, New York is the winner here. Have you tried anything from Widian? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.